Hello there. Welcome into a Wednesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that fine piece of technology is sponsored by Diversus Health. Mental health and well-being for all, a veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you. And I'd love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. That is the text and the phone line. Or if you're watching the show on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you just comment right there. Easy as that. I thought that the Avs were done making moves. I thought that was about it. Bringing back Yoel Kiviranta. But this move for Victor Olofsson, who played last year for the Vegas Golden Knights, feels like just something that kind of fell into their lap. And I am going to keep going back to that Charlie Coyle trade because it continues to eat at me. Is this really what the Avs were thinking when they traded Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood to Columbus? Just opening up this money just so they have it. Because all of their moves that they have made since have been those kind of moves. Well, we got the money, we'll do it. Not anything major. Victor Olofsson is not a huge acquisition. But the moves that the Avs have made, it just looks like they wanted to open up the space just to have it. And I guess the credit that you give Chris McFarland is without the money that he opened up, a move like today would not be possible. And while Victor Olofsson is not a player that necessarily tips the scales in the Avalanche's favor, it's a good move. Another good, solid hockey move made by Chris McFarland to fortify the depth of this Avalanche team. Victor Olofsson last year for Vegas, a little banged up, and that's part of the story here. Right? You wonder why somebody is signing this late in the game as a free agent. There's usually a reason. And I think with Victor Olofsson, more than anything else, he's been banged up. So something to watch when he dons an Avs sweater. Can he stay healthy? But even being banged up, the guy put up 29 points last year. He had 15 goals. He had good production for the time he was on the ice. And with the Avs bringing back Yoel Kiviranta, two things that Chris McFarland mentioned in his statement in the press release that were notable then and are even more notable now. Called Yoel Kiviranta a responsible player. When I think responsibility, I think defense. And that's who Yoel Kiviranta has been. And he also mentioned that essentially at times Yoel Kiviranta can help them 5-on-5 on the offensive side. So two things that stuck out to me at the time. Yoel Kiviranta, not a power play type of guy. And then also timely goals, perhaps, maybe a quality over quantity scenario with him. And this was a guy who last year put up 16 goals. Kiviranta did. But the assessment from the Avalanche was essentially telling you Yeah, we're not bringing him back because he scored 16 goals and we think it's going to continue. We're bringing him back for what we acquired him in the first place to do, which was be a defensive-minded forward to fill out our bottom six. And you know what happened at the expense of the Avs when Kiviranta was a member of the Dallas Stars? So you know that timely goal scoring is in his bag. But the Avalanche were not bringing him back with the idea that he was going to be the player he was last year. Now that they bring in Victor Olofsson, never a huge goal scorer, but again, 15 goals, 14 assists last year. That's pretty in line with what he's been in the NHL. So a more dependable goal scorer, a little bit more quantity, and can play on the power play because of the shot he has. This is a good shot. So everything that maybe Yoel Kiviranta was last year, but the Avs don't expect him to be this year, Victor Olofsson can be this year. And you put, coincidentally, Kiviranta and Olofsson probably on a line with Ross Colton if you wanted to keep Jack Drury as the fourth line center, because you know how well that worked last year with Drury as the fourth line center. That's what it kind of looks like the Avs have going in that bottom six right now. Of course, the bottom six can be somewhat interchangeable. But it's a good depth move for the Colorado Avalanche. And oh, by the way, because here's the other potential for why they traded Charlie Coyle. They had to give Columbus something of value to take Miles Wood's contract. That could be a potential explanation for why they did that deal. And Olofsson and Kiviranta combined will make less money than Miles Wood did last year. So another tidy bit of business done by Chris McFarland. And now you are in a situation, obviously Logan O'Connor, in his injury situation, will hang over this team to start the season. The Avs will not be whole coming out of training camp. But now, essentially, all you're doing is saying we need one young guy to fill in for Logan O'Connor. And then when Logan O'Connor is back, we need no young guys. So the Daniil Gushkin, who they picked up from San Jose, the Gavin Brindley, who was part of the return with the Coyle trade from Columbus, Ivan, Matthew Steinberg, two players you've seen before play for the Colorado Avalanche. Now all of those guys are vying for a spot in that bottom six to be a placeholder, a seat filler for Logan O'Connor. And we have heard, we've heard a lot of depth conversation, even the Broncos. The depth conversation has been front and center. It's been that way for the Colorado Avalanche, and it's been that way for the Denver Nuggets. Now, with the Broncos, they're a unique case because they have no other choice but to rely on young players. Right? The roster is too big. There are too many spots. You can't have veterans at every position. But with the Avalanche and the Nuggets, some of the thought was, hey, plug in those holes with some younger players to provide that depth. And both of these teams this offseason have said emphatically and resoundingly, the heck we are. We are not relying on young players to fill out this roster. We're bringing in veterans. Now, what I will say, the contrast between the two is that at no point have the Avalanche really said they're investing in their youth the way that the Denver Nuggets did. So the Avalanche, what they have done during the offseason, it's been pretty on brand. And also, who have they drafted that they still have at this point? They keep trading them in all of these deals for veteran players. So not only have the Avalanche really not embraced that idea as much as the Nuggets tried to, they really can't even say it with a straight face, because at any juncture, if they have a chance to get a veteran, they're going to deal their top prospect immediately and without hesitation. With the Denver Nuggets, it is quickly becoming, we were going to do that, and we had guys, right, that they drafted. They have not moved Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett, Deron Holmes, etc. But they were only embracing the youth that they had on their team because they had to, because they had no money. This offseason, by trading Porter, they got money. And what'd they do with that money? They didn't sit on it. They went out and got veterans. And now it's to the point that you wonder if, Strawther, Pickett, and some of these guys even have a real role with the Denver Nuggets. They'll play. The season is long. It's 82 games. I think part of the equation is they're going to try and control, Jokic, Gordon, and Murray, their workload, their minutes. So you're going to see the young guys, but do they have a role on this team? And it's the same thing with the Colorado Avalanche, especially when Logan O'Connor comes back. It's like there is no room at the end for an Ivan or a Gavin Brindley or a Matthew Steinberg. There's one spot while O'Connor is out. But once he returns, there's no youth on this Colorado Avalanche team. Even on the back end, they went out and got Brett Burns. And you know what? Certainly in the Avalanche's case, and with the Nuggets as well, I don't have a problem with this. I see the merit, especially in the NBA, of playing young players and developing them. But hey, if you have the money, like the Nuggets got this offseason and that the Avalanche have, when you're in a championship window, when you're a championship or bust type of team, you have the money and you can sign some guys, then do it. And I think that the Nuggets, more than anything else, it was more of, we can't go out and get veterans. And so now let's lean into the idea that we're developing our young talent. But another veteran added to the mix with the Colorado Avalanche. He'll be in that bottom six. And one other thing, since I brought up Victor Olofsson's former team, and when you think of Vegas, what do you think of? 4 letters, right? Yes, 4. LTIR. The Avs right now have about $1.5 million in cap space. If they so choose, they can utilize Logan O'Connor's $2.5 million and go out and acquire another veteran. The catch with that is, and where it makes more sense with Gabriel Landeskog in the situation he's been in recently versus Logan O'Connor. Once the player comes back, you have to be cap compliant. So can the Avs still go shopping for a veteran? They absolutely can. They absolutely can. And you get maybe a third line center. You move Ross Colton out to the wing. Maybe you put Kiwi Ranta on the fourth line with Parker Kelly and Jack Drury. And now definitely no young guys. But the bill will come due around the holidays, and Logan O'Connor is going to be back, and the Avs have to make his contract work. So we'll see if the Avs choose to utilize that, knowing that unlike Gabriel Landeskog, there is an end date here with Logan O'Connor's absence. But both the Avalanche and the Nuggets preaching depth. And how have they each gone about it this offseason? Veterans, veterans, and more veterans. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. How are you feeling about the Avs? This is great. Hey, if they make a move, great opportunity to bring up the upcoming NHL season. I know we're looking forward to the football season, but we can look a little past it. How are you feeling about the Avs? And I won't make the same mistake I did when they signed Kiwi Ranta. Although I did leave myself some wiggle room. I said it looks like the Avs are done. I won't even say that this time around. Because, hey, if an opportunity like this one, Victor Olofsson, 1 year at $5.75 or $1.575 million falls into their lap again, I fully expect Chris McFarland to do it. 719-247-1313, just getting going on this Wednesday. Coming up next, why isn't anybody talking about the curse of Peyton Manning? Was just talking to producer Ray about Greg McElroy's big, bold prediction that Nebraska would be a sleeper in the SEC this year. But I will, and just to let everyone in on the joke, Nebraska definitely does not play in the SEC, and Greg McElroy did. So, whoops. But in fairness, like, we were talking about this yesterday when Nate Kreckman joined me. Hawaii is hosting ACC Power Stanford this weekend. So, like, should someone like Greg McElroy know better? Yes. But you couldn't just simply say, well, Nebraska can be in the SEC. They're in the middle of the country. That doesn't work anymore. But yeah, he was on ESPN, Nebraska. I'll co-sign his sentiments. I'll just apply it to the Big Ten. Because I do think, and a lot of people are jumping on Nebraska this year because Matt Rule, look at his track record everywhere he's gone. This is the time where his teams pop. But not in the SEC. I don't know, as obsessed with curses as we are, just in life, but especially in sports, why is no one talking about the curse of Peyton Manning? Look at how bad it's been for the two franchises that he played for when it comes to the very position that Peyton Manning played. Now I know what you're thinking. Well, Colts had Andrew Luck. Okay, how did that story end? Curse still holds up. Andrew Luck walked away way too early and sent the Indianapolis Colts spiraling. And you know the story of the Denver Broncos very well. Just for fun, here are the quarterbacks that both of the franchises have gone through since Peyton Manning left them. Or, more accurately, in the Colts case, when they left Peyton Manning. Colts have had Luck, Matt Hasselbeck, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Sam Ehlinger, current Denver Bronco, Gardner Minshew, current Kansas City Chief, Joe Flacco, Anthony Richardson, who has now been benched in favor of Daniel Jones. The Broncos, in a shorter amount of time since Peyton Manning left, have had Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Brock Osweiler, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, samesies, Brandon Allen, Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater, Russell Wilson, and Bo Nix. Why is nobody talking about the fact that Peyton Manning has cursed two franchises and their inability to find a long-term solution at that position? But even if you take out Andrew Luck, because that's the easy cop-out, because you make the comparison between the two, and you would go, well, the Colts have fared much better. Even taking out Andrew Luck, I would say they've fared better than the Denver Broncos have. On a year-to-year basis. Now, both teams have one playoff appearance in that time. But the Colts, I think, have fared a little bit better. They were decent with Phillip Rivers. And they won some games with some of these other guys. I think the numbers would say, even if you take out Andrew Luck, which would heavily tilt it in the Colts' favor, you could still say that the Colts have navigated things a little bit better than the Denver Broncos, but neither have done a great job. Right? Neither have done a great job. One other thing you could say for the Colts, They only swung and missed on one drafted quarterback. Broncos have missed on two. Lynch and Drew Lock. You thought I was going to say Bo Nix, didn't you? How dare you? That's pending. But I was thinking about this too. It's interesting to put the two lists together and say, yeah, they really have spent a lot of time missing on quarterbacks and not finding the answer. Although, to be fair to the Colts, that Rivers, Wentz, and Ryan, between health and age, I don't know that they could have expected to find a long-term solution with that group. Or Joe Flacco, for that matter. But I looked up, because I think the Colts are starting to gain a reputation that they can't figure out the position, especially in the wake of benching Anthony Richardson. And that is absolutely on them as an organization. Everyone, even the ones that thought Anthony Richardson could be something, said, whatever you do, don't play the guy right away. And what did the Colts do? So they screwed up any chance they had with Anthony Richardson to be a long-term solution at quarterback. That's on them. Now, was Anthony Richardson ever going to be that? I think a lot of people rightly had their doubts. And certainly Anthony Richardson has done some things himself where you go, yeah, I don't know that this dude is made of the right stuff. Asking out of football games is a bad look. But I find it interesting, even though the Colts and the Broncos, I think, have a well-earned reputation of having trouble figuring out the quarterback position. They're really not even close to the title holders in this regard. Since Peyton Manning retired, the Browns have had 11 starting quarterbacks. I always forget this one. The Houston Texans. Remember how the Houston Texans used to cycle through quarterbacks? The Houston Texans, and here's another one that most people forget, the Rams. The Rams had a lot of trouble finding quarterbacks, or their quarterbacks were hurt. So you have Cleveland's had 11 since Peyton Manning retired. Houston and LA have both had 10. Chicago and Washington have each had 9. And then you get to the Broncos, along with the Jets and Jaguars, who have had 8. So really, even though they're 3 away from Cleveland, there's a few teams in between them. And the Colts aren't even on that list. So I think it's important to keep things in context. Yes, the Broncos have done a very poor job of replacing Peyton Manning up until this point. The Colts did a really good job initially of replacing Peyton Manning, but then have struggled to find a replacement for Andrew Luck. But therein lies why it seems like the Broncos and the Colts should be higher on that list I just mentioned. It's because they've gotten it right multiple times. It should not surprise you that the Cleveland Browns have had the most starting quarterbacks. They haven't gotten it right yet. Houston had some with Deshaun Watson. That went awry, as you are well aware of. But the Rams, they certainly had it right a couple of times, but Cleveland, Houston, Chicago, Washington, the Jets, the Jaguars, they haven't gotten it right, arguably, ever. Now, that's strong, but you go back to the Bears, certainly, Cleveland, certainly, Washington, if you dig way back into their past, and for one shining moment, you thought they had something in Robert Griffin III. But I think that the Colts and the Broncos get the reputation because we can compare it to the fact that they nailed it multiple times. Especially the Colts. They nailed it with Andrew Luck and they nailed it with Peyton Manning as draftees. Broncos, actually, should we give the Colts credit for drafting John Elway? But the point is, the Broncos and the Colts have both had at multiple times throughout their history one of the best quarterbacks in the league. They have gotten it right multiple times in our lifetimes. And then you juxtapose that to the slop that they've been trotting out there since, and it makes it look worse. Meanwhile, there are teams that have been perpetually wandering the quarterback wasteland, and it's just like, well, yeah, they're going to do that. It's like that's their modus operandi. Cleveland Browns never going to find. Bears never going to find. Washington never going to find. Now, all three franchises think they have someone now, but it's like Broncos and the Colts, they haven't been as wrong as some of these other teams, even when they have struggled, even while they are struggling to find their next long-term franchise quarterback. They still have not been as bad as some of these other teams. So when you hear people bring up the Indianapolis Colts, maybe locally bring up the Denver Broncos, just know that, yes, they have done a pretty poor job in recent years trying to find a quarterback, but they're not as bad as some of these other teams. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, a long-anticipated move for our local soccer club has come to fruition. I'll tell you about the newest switchbacks player next on Extra Sports 1300. We're celebrating this season of hard work with our Labor Day giveaway, and 5 winners will score $1,000 each to make their holiday unforgettable. Yeah, you're like, Labor Day, I just don't do any work. No, now you can do even more. You can book a weekend getaway, host the perfect backyard bash, or treat yourself to that thing you deserve, whatever it may be. Head to extrasports1300.com now to enter this national contest for your chance to win. And with these quarterbacks and comparing how the Colts and the Broncos have failed to a certain extent to find the next guy, there is, and this would apply to the Broncos, the Colts, but so many other teams, and maybe it would apply to some of these other teams even more. Giving up on guys too soon. Right? I mean, I mentioned it. The Colts, it was Luck who retired. And then, I mean, no one's going to say that, well, Sam Ehlinger had more to give. And then the next guy was Richardson. And with the Broncos, it was Lynch and it was Locke. And that's the thing. With the young quarterbacks, yes, teams do give up too soon. I think just depends on how much you believed in the quarterback to begin with. Did the Colts, they gave up on Anthony Richardson. Was it too soon? Because if they messed him up to begin with by throwing him out there too early, is there a thought that there was any chance that Anthony Richardson was going to figure it out in Indianapolis? I know he's not best equipped for the Colts to win football games this year, but I think a lot of people are going beyond and they're like, yeah, he was never going to win anything there. Like, he was done. But do they give up on guys too early? I think with the two Broncos rookies before Bo Nix, I think there is a sentiment that was the case with Drew Lock. And I explained yesterday what that was all about. And it's the same thing as what Shane Steichen is doing. Head coach on a seat that is getting warmer by the second. The only way for them to potentially keep their job is to win football games. Vic Fangio did that, chose Teddy Bridgewater to try and win more games. And I think you look in retrospect, I think they did win more than they would have won with Drew Lock, but ultimately it wasn't enough for Vic Fangio to keep his job. I think there is the sentiment that the Broncos gave up on Drew Lock too soon. Does anybody think that they gave up on Paxton Lynch too soon? And Locke got more of a chance than Paxton Lynch did. So whether a team gives up on a guy too early, I mean, that's just all based on what you thought the quarterback was going to be. I would say in really all three of these cases, Richardson, Lynch, or Locke, I didn't think any of those three had what it took to be a franchise quarterback. But you could probably look at some of these other teams, especially the ones who seem to be perpetually going through quarterbacks. Cleveland with Baker Mayfield, that's an easy one. You know, Chicago, the Jets, did the Jets give up on Zach Wilson too soon? I mean, they gave up on him, and they gave up on him fairly quickly. But was it too soon? Because we also demand results. right? Even from young quarterbacks. You would think it's one thing if you demand that, hey, if the Colts are going to bring in Phillip Rivers or the Denver Broncos are going to bring in Russell Wilson, they need to produce immediately. But we almost hold these younger quarterbacks to that same standard. And that's what I would say with, obviously I've talked mostly about Bo Nix, but I would apply this to Drake May and Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. Maybe more Drake May and Caleb Williams because they did not have the rookie seasons that Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels did. Don't draw your ultimate conclusion about any of these guys this year. I always look at year 3 as the year where you go, okay, now we can start. If they start consistently, and that gets back to the Anthony Richardson part of it. Like, yeah, he's been around, but has he been playing consistently over this amount of time? Not really. But it's just, it points out our fickle nature because, we want these results from the quarterbacks. Even if they're young, we want them immediately. And then the team does move on, and then part of the fan base is like, why? It was too early. Well, because you were getting upset about how they weren't producing, which is all right. We're not the ones that are getting paid to make these decisions. But yeah, teams do give up on quarterbacks too soon. But in the Colts and the Broncos case, Colts have only one example of maybe that, if you believe they gave up on Anthony Richardson too soon. Broncos have 2 in the last decade. So it's not like these 2 teams have been cycling through rookie and young quarterbacks year after year after year. Even more locally now, and if you are a habitual listener of our Switchbacks broadcast, you will remember that a few weeks ago, Stephen Hogan, the sporting director of the Switchbacks, joined Roland and I after a match and said that there was a big move coming for this team. And now you see what the big move is as they signed Kyle Vassell for not just this season, but next season as well. Played at San Diego Loyal a couple of years ago. Maybe that's where the name sounds familiar. He's been playing in Scotland most recently. And this is the guy to fulfill that role that Ronaldo Damas had last year, what Justin Dillon had this year until he stepped away from the team. This is the true number 9 guy leading the line to score goals for this Switchbacks team. And what you've seen recently is great, that you have Quincy Huerman and Juan Tejada and Jonas Fjellberg stepping up and scoring goals. Matt Mahoney, even with the brace a couple of weeks ago. Like, that's great. And you need that. If you're going to be a championship team, think about the Switchbacks run last year and how many different guys chipped in with goals throughout that late season run into the playoffs and on to a championship. You need that. But what you need first is that guy that you could just look to and say, if all this other stuff isn't working, we can still look to this guy. And last year for this team, it was Ronaldo Damas. It started to be Justin Dillon this year. And then that, you know how that went. And they had to find somebody. And Stephen Hogan, in his in the press release from the club, says Vassell is a fantastic signing for our club. He is a physically imposing forward. That's another thing. Not a lot of physically imposing players with the switchbacks. A lot of skill, a lot of speed, not a lot of power. He's a physically imposing forward with a proven scoring record who will create chances for his teammates and take his own. And that is a key aspect of what that role is on a soccer team. It's not just, hey, when we need a goal, we're looking to you. Sure, that's part of what that role is. But you saw this last year. It's like Damas, in many ways, carried the switchbacks, and I would even say Justin Dillon served this purpose early on this year. Like carrying the goal-scoring load for much of the season until other guys started to find their way. And then what you saw last year was as Damas racked up the goals, teams put more and more effort into isolating him, making sure that he was not the one doing the damage, and then that's when other players popped up. Like there's an order of operations here that the switchbacks weren't really following over the last few weeks. And now with this addition, they can do that. And if he is as successful as he was last time he was in the USL Championship, then it opens up more for Quincy and opens up more for Jonas Filberg and Juan Tejada. They can move Tejada out wide now if they want to. So it opens up so much more flexibility from a lineup perspective for James Chambers, but it also allows them to put together an 11 that has players playing at their best position, right? And utilizing their strengths. Juan Tejada leading the line. I mean, the guy works as hard as anybody, but he's not the physically imposing presence that teams need at that position consistently. Now you could put him out wide, and now he can use his work rate, his speed, his ability to play passes into the box. I think boiling this down, the switchbacks roster, as we've seen them get healthier, we've seen guys assert themselves in certain roles, this potentially makes them whole. This gives them everything that you would expect a team to have. And it will create a cascading effect throughout the roster where everybody else is not being asked to. Everybody can play their natural positions. You know, Sean Payton yesterday was talking about Jade Barron, and he talked about how he's a nickel corner with outside corner flex. Switchbacks have a lot of players that are something with another position flex. They can play multiple positions, but where are they best? And this acquisition allows James Chambers to put everybody else in the spot that they are best at. And given, I know this weekend was a speed bump for this team that had been humming coming out of the that bye week they had after the 4th of July. But you look at this team over the last month or so, how they've performed, the results they've gotten, and now they add this. This is a potentially significant trajectory-altering move that I know Stephen Hogan was working on, but transfer windows and fees and all that kind of stuff come into play here. But it's done, and we'll see if he's available for the trip down to Phoenix. I'll be at Switchbacks training tomorrow and report back to you on those subjects. But this is good get, and a necessary addition for this team. It was to use another Sean Payton word. It was a must, not a need, Not a want, it was a must. And they took care of it. Switchbacks Saturday night in Phoenix, late one. Love for you to stay up late with Roland and I. 8:30 kick right here on Extra Sports 1300. Coming up next on the show, with the depth conversation that we have been having around the Denver Broncos, it almost inevitably leads to another conversation, which is, do the Broncos have too many players out of position, and should they clear out the room a little bit more? Talking Broncos wide receivers next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in hour 2 on this Wednesday. Appreciate you tuning in, whether you're just using your ears to do so or your eyes and your ears as we stream the show live on a daily basis on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at XTRA Sports 1300. And of course, this is a participatory show, unlike so many out there. One of the unique things that you have available for this show, as opposed to maybe your favorite podcast or television show, you can talk to me and at the entire Southern Colorado region. 719-247-1313 is the number to do that. You know how I know we just need to get going with the start of the NFL season around here? People are taking a good thing, an inherently good thing, and getting a little bit carried away with it. And here's what I mean. I don't know where this came from. I don't know who started it. But the idea that Devon Vele may be surplus to requirements for the Denver Broncos, like, again, I don't know where it came from. This should not be a thing. This should not be a conversation. And I can theorize where it came from. Have you seen a lot of Devon Vele lately? You haven't. Not playing a lot in the preseason game, but remind me what Sean Peyton said about who would not play in the preseason. What was that class of player? Starters, ones. I have taken Devon Vele's absence not as he has fallen out of favor, but that Sean Payton wants to protect him. Or at the very least, has seen all he needs to see from Devon Vele. So if you want to take the Broncos' depth at wide receiver and go, could the Broncos make a trade? I saw today that the Jets are looking for wide receiver help. Vikings, Steelers, same thing. That's how the most ideal trades work, right? You deal from a position of strength. And the Broncos certainly have more wide receivers than even the great Sean Payton can incorporate on a consistent basis. So, yeah, if somebody calls and says, hey, we watched Troy Franklin and we'd be interested in him, like, engage. That's what George Payton is there for. But Devon Vele is not I just got done yesterday saying he'll probably be the second leading receiver on the Denver Broncos. Remember what the Broncos did with Tim Patrick? Like, that's Devon Vele. I've seen other comparisons to Lil Jordan Humphrey. Right? Lil Jordan Humphrey was on the field quite a bit, right? But Devon Vele is an important piece of Sean Payton's puzzle. What he brings to the table, which I think is size. I think it's his route running ability. And he is still a young player, but I think the Broncos believe that he has the ability to be a pretty sure-handed wide receiver. So if you want to theorize, like, should the Broncos trade somebody, how about Troy Franklin? right? Would that make sense? Because that's a guy that I promise you is lower in the pecking order than Devon Vele. And that's what it is. Depth chart, roles, wide receiver 2, Sean Payton talked about yesterday. They don't have such things. But they do have a pecking order. Right? And it's, you could call it a pecking order of trust if you want. But like Devon Vele has more of a cemented role with this Broncos team than Troy Franklin does. So to me, if the Broncos are going to look at potentially dealing one of these guys, I would look to a Troy Franklin and say, what is he bringing to the table that like Marvin Mims can't do? Marvin Mims is fast. Marvin Mims can run very fast in a straight line. Now, it's not what Marvin Mims is best at, which leads into my other point. I would argue that the Broncos should not deal any of them for the very reasons that Sean Payton pointed out yesterday. They don't have a wide receiver 2, 3, 4, 5. They have a wide receiver that does this and a wide receiver that does that. If they take away one of those guys, then that's a skill set that is being eliminated from that wide receiver room. And now if Sean Payton, looks down the bench, he's like, you know what, on this third down, I really need a guy that I can, kind of do a swing pass out to, or, traded Marvin Mims. I don't have that anymore. Like, he wants it this way. He wants 6 receivers. So it doesn't make any sense, and it would only make sense to keep all of them. Now, if somebody offers a great deal, then you always do that. That's always the caveat. If somebody's willing to offer you great value for a guy, then yeah, you do it and you try to figure the rest out later. But I don't think that the Broncos are going to get any great. You think that Troy Franklin or Devon Vele is going to fetch a day 2 pick? Because here's where people can't get carried away. You can see Sean Payton's vision. And you can believe in that vision. But please don't mistake the fact that the Broncos have a lot of wide receivers and Sean Payton has a way to utilize all of them, and they have some type of depth. Don't confuse that for somehow this is the best wide receiving core in the National Football League, because it's far from that. It's the right receiving core for Sean Payton, but it doesn't hold up with Barry May. They're at best the 3rd best wide receiving core in their own division. But Sean Payton wants it this way. He doesn't want that, huge ego, diva-like receiver that's going to demand the ball all the time, that he has to have on the field all the time. He doesn't want that. And he has assembled a group of wide receivers that are egoless. And that I'm saying that in a complimentary way. Even starting with the guy that probably is wide receiver 1, if Sean Payton were to label it that way, in Courtland Sutton. The guy, despite the success he has had, despite the fact that he is easily the best wide receiver that the Broncos have, no ego. That's what Sean Payton wants. And he wants to mix and match these guys. Can't make the mistake of overvaluing what you have. And what the Broncos have is a nice mix of talent and different skill sets. They are deep in the sense that there's not a huge separation between a lot of them. That if one were to get hurt, then you would be able to put in a guy that is pretty close skill-wise. Now, the skill set is a different story, but the overall skill level, all these guys are about the same. So it's a good thing that the Broncos have, but that can't get confused with that the Broncos have 6 Pro Bowl wide receivers and they don't know what to do with them. What would any of these guys fetch on the open market? Because there have been talks about moving Courtland Sutton before. And it didn't happen. Why? Because they weren't getting what they were asking for. Why could that be? Because other teams didn't value Courtland Sutton the way that maybe Broncos fans did. So, but this is a good thing. It's a good thing that the Broncos have going in their wide receiving core. But it's a good thing, and they have depth in the way that Sean Payton wants them to. Right? You take Courtland Sutton late in your fantasy draft, and you're not taking any of these other guys in your fantasy draft. Right? So it's just different way of looking at it. And that's what Sean Payton was talking about yesterday. Like, they're not conventional. They don't look at the wide receiver room and even the running back room for that matter the same way that you and I might. The Broncos don't have the best collection of talent at the wide receiver position in the NFL, far from it. But all of these guys bring something to the table that Sean Payton believes he can utilize to help the Denver Broncos win football games. And really part of my, if you want to call it doubt about the Denver Broncos, people act like I have the Broncos winning 4 games this year. But part of my doubt is not even really necessarily Bo Nix related. It's that I think Bo Nix is good to an extent, but I think he could use talent around him that can elevate him, that can push him a little bit further. I don't think Bo Nix can elevate the play of everyone around him. He's not one of those types of quarterbacks. Certainly hasn't shown it so far, and I don't know that he's going to be. I made the comparisons to a Brock Purdy. Like, that's a good quarterback. That's a quarterback worth having on your team, but you better have some good weapons around him. And that's kind of where more of my doubt is with this Denver Broncos team is I don't know that I don't trust Bo Nix. I don't know that I trust the guys around him. And I think you saw that late last season, that some of these guys in big-time moments could not be trusted. Now, a lot of them are young. And that's kind of the whole crux of this Broncos team is that even though they had success, they're still very young in a lot of places. So there's more development from all these guys, Franklin and Vele even, and certainly Pat Bryant. There's more room to go, but we're talking about what can the Broncos be this year with a wide receiver group that maybe does not stack up well in terms of overall talent and is young. But it's all part of Sean Payton's vision. This is the way he wants it. He did it before, and he says he could do it again. But I don't think that the Broncos should be in the business of trading any of these guys. And I don't think even if they wanted to, that they would fetch a return that would have you saying, oh, yeah, I'd rather have that than Pat Bryant. I'd rather have a 6th-round pick than Troy Franklin. I don't think that the market – I get the connection with the Jets, right? Their general manager used to be a part of the Denver Broncos organization. I get that. And there are probably conversations. But like the type of receiver talent that, like the Steelers are looking for a guy, a wide receiver too. The only guy that could be that on the Pittsburgh Steelers is Cortland Sutton. And the Broncos obviously aren't trading him. So it's a good thing that the Broncos have, but let's not overvalue it and make it out to be more than what it is. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. Welcome back. Just want to give you a little heads up. If you're unfamiliar, every week we have a extra sweet deal of the week, just a way for you to save a few bucks on a variety of things. And this week's extra sweet deal of the week, well, it's twice as tasty. For just $25, you could get $50 to spend at iTopic Colorado Springs Frozen Treat Paradise. 24 flavors, 70 plus toppings. My boys love it. Again, $25 gets you $50 to spend at iTopic. The deal goes live 9 a.m. Friday morning, extrasports1300.com. to take advantage of the extra sweet deal of the week. And you can even go there now. There are some deals up there, like, for instance, City Golf COS, one of my favorite joints. You can get an hour of simulator play where you can golf any place in the world from right here in Colorado Springs. Hour of simulator play for half price. That's right now. You go to extrasports1300.com, but keep an eye out. 9 a.m. iTopic, our extra sweet deal of the week. You could tell me, is this a good sign? So the Tennessee Titans had a little kerfuffle at practice between Cam Ward. You're familiar with Cam Ward and his importance to the Tennessee Titans, both this year and in the future. And Jeffrey Simmons, who is a Tennessee Titan of high regard currently. Apparently, Cam Ward completed touchdown pass to Calvin Ridley, did some sort of a celebration. If you're a Miami fan, you probably know the celebration because he does it a lot. And Jeffrey Simmons, one of the main players on the Titans defense, gave him a little shove. And the two of them exchanged words and had to be broken up. But Cam Ward saying it's all good. Jeff is strong as bleep, Ward said. It was fun, and I think it was what we needed. We love competing just with me and Jeff, and I'm excited to have that man as my teammate. Is this a good sign for the 2025 Tennessee Titans, who just so happen to be opening up the season against the Denver Broncos? I don't like it. The joint practice skirmishes, I'm not a huge fan of, but I don't know. I think NFL teams secretly love them. But fighting with each other, skirmishing with each other, I don't know that I like that. Especially when one of the guys involved is the franchise. With all due respect to Jeffrey Simmons, the guy that he's getting into it with is the face of that franchise, the future of that franchise. We are getting into the dog days of summer, and the players are just as eager to get the season started as you and I are. So I get it. It's going to happen from time to time. I just can't get to the point where, like, somehow this is some kind of catalyst that will catapult the Tennessee Titans to a shocking season in which they win the AFC South. Now, if it's just this one thing and it hasn't been happening in training camp so far and it doesn't happen again between now and the start of the season, then okay, it's an isolated incident. Cooler heads prevailed. We all move on. But if this is something that happens multiple times, then I think it's more of a sign that a team is maybe lacking some leadership, maybe lacking some discipline. And I've said, Brian Callahan, first coach fired. Whatever the odds are on him, if you are into that betting market, I look his way. So I think that the negative aspects of such an occasion outweigh the benefits. So I don't like it, especially when it's the franchise QB. And you know what the funniest thing about this is? This is one of the only times that Cam Ward has been discussed. Not just on this show, but like in general. Like if you didn't know any better, you wouldn't be able to remember who the number one pick was. I cannot recall a first round pick or a top overall pick that was a quarterback. I mean, Trayvon Walker, when he went to the Jags, like we forgot about that guy almost instantly. And his play on the field certainly helped us do it. But this is a quarterback being taken number one overall, and we barely discussed him. And I say we as sports fans, sports media, he is the most unheralded top overall pick that's a quarterback in my life. And he's starting week one. It's not even that, oh, this is going to be a redshirt year for Cam Ward. He's going to be out there against the Broncos week one. And I think it certainly speaks to where the Tennessee Titans are in terms of relevance in the National Football League. But also, what other quarterback is in this draft? I'm sorry, it has to be said. It has to be said. Who's the quarterback that's being talked about the most? It's Shedeur. The way he's talked about, you would think he was the number one overall pick. And look, I'm innocent in all of this because Shedeur, there's a local angle to Shedeur. But he is discussed nationally like he was the number one pick. And even if without Shedeur, you know who the next guy would be? Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart is the second most talked about quarterback from this draft class. We can't even get to the number one overall pick in the top two most talked about quarterbacks. And we can't even go three now that I'm thinking about it because of Dylan Gabriel's proximity to Shedeur Sanders. He's the third. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I mean, you ask me who I'm more interested in. Yeah, I'm more interested in the two rookies in Cleveland than I am Cam Ward. Now, there are some reasons for that not everybody in sports media has. But just in a general sense, I'm more interested in them. There's a competition aspect to what they're doing as well. We don't even have to talk about Cam Ward battling. They might have announced at his press conference right after he was drafted that he was going to be the starter. Like, it hasn't even been a thought that maybe Cam Ward wouldn't start the season opener. It is a unique situation, to be sure. And recently in football, when these kind of unique situations occur, there is a name that is usually the reason why. Sanders. Why isn't Team X talked about in college football? Because they probably spent that time talking about Deion. Why isn't Cam Ward getting discussed? Because we got to talk about Shedeur. Not right or wrong. It's what you're interested in. And more people I think, are interested in what's going on in Cleveland and maybe even what's going on in New York or New Jersey, to be more accurate, than what's going on in Tennessee. But Cam Ward's going to be the only rookie quarterback out there week 1 unless Tyler Shuck ends up winning this job. And you'll see that play out this weekend. Tyler Shuck versus Spencer Rattler. But Cam Ward's going to start week 1. And this skirmish is like the first piece of significant intel on what Cam Ward is up to that we have had all offseason. But to take that subject and move it one step forward, are we sure it's a good idea that Cam Ward is starting week 1? You know, we've had this. Anthony Richardson is now benched, and his career as a Colt is effectively over, barring an injury to Daniel Jones. Like, it's a wrap for him. I'm not going to say in the NFL, but in Indianapolis, it sure seems like he's done. And why did he become a quarterback that Shane Steichen doesn't trust enough to play this season? Because Shane Steichen started in week 1. And Cam Ward certainly has more experience than Anthony Richardson. But you have that conversation about an organization potentially ruining a young quarterback by playing him too early. And then we have these other conversations when it comes to Jackson Dart. People worried about the Giants throwing him into the fire too soon because of their gauntlet of a schedule. And the same thing in Cleveland. Everybody accepts that Joe Flacco is going to be the starter. Nobody says boo. Because whether it's Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders, they want to make sure people want them to have a soft landing spot. Well, what about Cam Ward? The first game he has in the NFL is against arguably the league's best defense. Is that a soft landing spot for him? You have 3 of the first 4 weeks for Cam Ward at arguably the best defense in the NFL. Then home against arguably one of the best defenses in the NFC in the Rams. Jared Verse and Cam Ward are going to reignite that Miami-Florida State rivalry. Then you have Indianapolis. Okay, that's fine. And then you go up against one of the best pass rushing teams in Houston. Where's Cam Ward's soft landing spot? Why aren't people looking out for Cam Ward? Are we sure the Titans aren't making a mistake? And that's why I say, Brian Callahan, if Cam Ward comes out and struggles, and it's not like Cam Ward is Bo Nix, right? And thank you, Bo Nix, for being now the standard to which we hold all college quarterbacks to in terms of experience. As the extreme on one end of the spectrum, and Anthony Richardson being the other. You know, is Cam Ward as seasoned or even close to as seasoned as a college quarterback as Bo Nix? Has he played as much college football against big-time competition? And I like Cam Ward. And I think he has a chance to be very good. But we just kind of all accepted when the Titans said we're going to start him. And it's like, well, are you going to start Will Levis? Of course not. Well, yeah, you kind of are, because he is your franchise. He is your future. So if you have to throw I know Will Levis got hurt, but I'm just saying before that, because Cam Ward was named the starter immediately. Yeah, you do throw out the lesser quarterback because you want to. The Titans aren't winning anything this year. But it's so funny how we're having these conversations about protecting Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel or Jackson Dart. And yet we're not having it because we just decided Brian Callahan knows best and Cam Ward is starting week 1. That is a brutal start to his schedule. We've talked about it before what the Broncos have in store, but they got the Rams right after that. They got the Texans in 2 weeks after the Ram game. I hope this is not the case, but I see a scenario where after month 1, Cam Ward is going to be talked about a lot more than he is right now, and it will not be for good reasons. It will be because of how poorly he has started the season, because of the defenses he has to go up against, and the fact that he's playing his first games in the NFL. But I guess what it is there's just this perceived divide between Cam Ward and every other quarterback in this draft. And there was some of that during the lead up to the draft. And I said, he may be the best. He's not way better than everybody else. He's not way more ready than everybody else to step onto an NFL field. So it'll be interesting to see how Cam Ward's career starts, because no one has even given it a second thought that Cam Ward is starting week 1, whereas everyone's trying to protect Jackson Dart and protect Shedeur Sanders and protect Dylan Gabriel. Maybe there's not as much protection of Tyler Shuck now that I think about it. Maybe Cam Ward's not alone. I don't know. A lot of people are saying protect Tyler Shuck. 719-24-7. 1313 more Drive Time Sports after this. The new commissioner the CEO, excuse me, of the PGA Tour, Brian Rolapp, today promised significant change to the current model that you see on the PGA Tour, and he's putting together a committee, a team, if you will. And that team will be led by Tiger Woods. So if this is golf's Avengers, then Tiger Woods would be their Tony Stark. So they're going to look at everything and they're going to try and make the product better. And I think where this is going is you're going to see what the most likely outcome was going to be out of LIV popping up on the map. And I liken it to the XFL when they came around, and this ridiculous idea from Vince McMahon that somehow the XFL would, and even going back to the USFL, this idea that they would rival the NFL. Like people would actually be making their decision about whether they want to be an NFL fan or an XFL fan. It's nonsense. It always was. But what came of that ultimately with the XFL is that the NFL looked at what the XFL was doing and says, yeah, they kind of went to the XFL buffet and were like, we kind of like that. We don't like that. We like that. We don't like that. Some of the broadcast technology, some of the camera angles that you get in an NFL game that make it the best quality sports product on television came from the XFL. And they deserve some credit for that. But eventually they went out of business because their product was far inferior to the product the NFL had. And when LIV came around, I saw something similar playing out. The only sticking point, the only issue was, as wealthy as Vince McMahon is, he doesn't have that Saudi money. So I didn't think LIV would go away as quickly as some of these fledgling football leagues that we see that, and now there's the one that The Rock is a part of, and they're spouting the same nonsense that, hey, if you love the NFL, you'll love us. No, we won't, because it's a far inferior product, and we don't know anybody that's playing in your league. But LIV has that Saudi money, so they could actually take quality players from the PGA Tour and poach them, and they have. And they could also afford to stick around for longer, even if the PGA Tour was crushing them in the way that the NFL, or maybe it was more just apathy from NFL fans that crushed the XFL. There's a whole documentary about it you can watch and figure out for yourself what happened to the XFL. And there's a book about the USFL along the same line. But LIV has the money to be always had the money to be a real pest for the PGA. But I thought the outcome was going to be the same. Eventually, the PGA would handpick some of the things that LIV was doing, because all in all, LIV is pretty ridiculous. Have you ever seen LIV Golf? It's a pretty ridiculous outfit. But are there aspects to it that the PGA Tour can take? And that's been kind of the conversation since. Like, yeah, LIV is kind of a joke, but they do this thing, the team golf aspect. There's some merit to that because we all love the Ryder Cup, which is coming up. We love that. Obviously, that's a U.S. versus Europe thing. So it's hard to replicate that unless it's U.S. versus Europe. But there are some things that LIV is doing that I think the PGA Tour will take. But ultimately, what's the consumer-facing thing that they're going to do? Is it just going to be, we're going to do some things that LIV does, which is money related, because that's the thing they do the best, is pay their golfers a ton of money. And by doing that and bringing back some of these golfers, it will enhance the product for you, the consumer. Is that all they're banking on? Because that's not really maximizing the PGA Tour. That's not really improving it. That's getting back what you lost. So I'm curious what it is to make it a better product. And I think that, one, there's a critical mass that we reach as sports fans where we're like, we just can't. And I'll tell you the one I run into constantly with everything else I have going on in my life and everything else I look forward to, right? The NFL, NBA free agency, all this kind of stuff. I find that it's very difficult for me to intensely follow both the WNBA and Major League Baseball. Now, that may not be a dilemma for a lot of people, but it's my dilemma. For you, it might be the NBA or the NHL. You just say, you know what? I can't watch the NHL. I just don't have the time to invest in another sport. And I think there's some of that. And there are some sports that are always they're going to be more event sports. And they just won't gain any more market share. Golf is huge. People love golf. That's not the issue. Do they love watching golf? Would they take the PGA Tour over college football, over the NFL, over Major League Baseball, over college basketball in terms of watching the product? I just think there's a certain point where even us diehard sports people run out of room in our brains and our day, and we just can't watch everything all the time. And we got to make choices. And the PGA makes a very easy choice for us. Or golf, I should say, more specifically. Golf makes it very easy for us. Tennis, the same way. These 4 events. These 4, just tune in there and you're good. Right? PGA Championship, Masters, the Open, US Open. Those 4 events are what most people care about. The same with tennis. It's Wimbledon, it's the Australian Open, it's the US Open, and it's Roland Garros. So to me, if the PGA is trying to figure out a way to gain more market share, if you will, I don't know who they would trail behind, but go up 1 or 2 pegs up the pecking order, like overtake MLS or overtake Major League Baseball. If they're looking to do that, I think you have to try, and I don't know if they can, you have to try and make all your other tournaments mean almost as much as your majors. And right now it's so far apart. I don't know how they make that up. But that's, to me, the consequence of it. They've tried, they do the FedEx Cup. That's what's going on right now. Yeah, I'm aware of it. And I'll watch if it comes on, but I'm kind of a sicko, right? And it's kind of what I get paid to do. But the casual fan, the everyday sports fan, I don't know what numbers the FedEx playoff gets. But to me, if you could just, do the I Dream of Jeannie thing and cross your arms and nod your head and improve the PGA Tour and get more people to watch on a consistent basis, you have to try and make these other tournaments that aren't the majors mean more. And I don't think just giving the golfer the more money than he was going to win is worth it. Maybe it's the waste management. And that's something that LIV brings to all of their tournaments, right? We all talk about the waste management every year or tune into it because it's kind of like the way that Happy Gilmore, when he was in tournaments, we're like, that's the Waste Management Open. And that's fun. And we like that. LIV kind of does that all the time. So is that the PGA maybe not taking themselves as seriously, maybe relaxing some of the rules and allowing fans to be a little bit rowdier? I don't know. I mean, I don't blame them for trying. You always got to try and improve yourself. And LIV is really being a pain in your neck. I do some. I just don't know. I hope Tiger does. I like watching golf. Love playing golf. But to me, one of the big things is if it's not one of the four majors, then what's the consequence here? And getting me to lock in for multiple hours on a Sunday. 719-247-1313. How would you improve the PGA Tour? Coming up next, we'll hit the three stories that are driving the show.